So one afternoon, I was walking alongside a field. It was mostly weeds mixed in with brightly colored wildflowers. And to my delight, I could see several butterflies fluttering about. One in particular caught my eye because its wing was so badly damaged. And I was amazed at how battered it was. And yet, even in the strong breeze, it was still able to fly. As it gently came to rest, I adjusted my lens and quickly snapped a photo. August will be 2 years since I've came on staff here at First Methodist. And during this time, I've witnessed moments of joy, celebrating the exchange of wedding vows. There's been births and baptisms here in our church family. There have been moments of tenderness during prayer and healing services, and times of tears as families have laid loved ones to rest, and sweet hymns like Amazing Grace have been sung in the Faith Chapel. There's been upset and even bitterness over differences in theological beliefs, people broken and in pain, and moments of fear, scared I wouldn't have the right words to say to the families that are hurting or worried about their loved ones in the hospital. Worry my words would fall flat to the person struggling to decide how to best care for their spouse, facing loss of strength and failing memory. Sometimes struggling to know if my own abilities were good enough for the work of this ministry. And at times denying Christ when I knew He was speaking to me, telling me to pray out loud with someone, and yet I didn't, worried my words wouldn't be as eloquent as others. How many times have I asked, "Who am I and why me, Lord?" Sometimes we're broken with grief, or maybe a slave to addiction, discouraged because what we perceive as our own imperfections or weaknesses, we allow them to kind of stop us in our tracks. Or those who feel helpless because of a physical handicap. Or what about the sick, those overcome by disease? We are a world filled with people broken, mentally, physically, and spiritually. If we look to the Bible, we know there is profound truth that God chooses to work through broken people to spread His word and accomplish His divine purpose. Sometimes we become complacent, thinking we have nothing to offer, or we find ourselves questioning our own worthiness and capability, believing that our brokenness disqualifies us from serving our Almighty Creator. But when we look upon the stories of the Bible, they remind us of God's extraordinary power to transform us. A story we know and one I connect with is about Moses. Through a burning bush of all things, God speaks to Moses and tells him to go back to Egypt and demand the Israelites be freed from slavery. But Moses was hesitant to answer God's call because he felt inadequate and was slow to speech. Moses didn't think he was fit for the job, but the Bible shows us how God chose a human with flaws, how He still chooses the weak to confound the strong. Through God's power, Moses became the deliverer of the Israelites. Today, if you're feeling uncertain, facing hardships, feeling rejected, maybe unworthy or ill-equipped, flawed with limitations, the question, "Who am I?" can be answered. In John, we read the words, "Yet to all who received Him, to those who believed in His name, He gave the right to become children of God." Jesus Himself tells us, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Recently, within a week's time span, I encountered 3 people who made an impression. One was just 16 years old, and on June 2nd, she rang the bell after completing her cancer treatments. The day that we met, she experienced a medical emergency, but in the midst of all of it, she was still full of life and looked to the future with hope, knowing with certainty that God is with her. 2 others that crossed my path were people faced with a terminal illness, and yet they showed so much courage and incredible faith. One, in his last days, committed to serving at church camp, helping youth to know Christ so that they might reflect God's light out into the world. The other, she was just warm and just filled with just amazing peace. They each exuded a strength that can only come from that inner awareness and knowing of God and giving their lives to Him. When we offer our brokenness to Christ, we tap into His strength. He takes the shattered pieces and molds us into vessels that proclaim His love, mercy, and grace to a hurting world. Through His power and His might, He equips us to be instruments of His divine works. How good is He, our Creator in heaven.